Good morning and welcome to Tuesday morning, the 9th of November today. We've been moving through sections, so we don't really mention it all that much, but we're at the Lord's Prayer, the Sermon on the Mount, and part one of our study was Kingdom Character. Part two, which we just finished up with our last devotion reading, is Kingdom Commands, and today we begin a section on kingdom devotion. And it covers chapter 6, verses 1 through 18. By the time we're done with this section, a lead-in reading, just one short paragraph by Eberhard Arnold. The Sermon on the Mount is not a high-tension moralism. It is the revelation of God's real power in human life. If we take our surrender to God seriously and allow Him to enter our lives as light, as the only energy which makes new life possible, then we will be able to live the new life. We will be able to live the new life. And so today's reading is entitled From the Heart. It focuses on Matthew 6:1 and then also verses 16 through 18. Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. In other words, if you're living your faith so others can see and admire you, then you're getting all your reward. When you fast, do not look somber as the hypocrites do, for they disfigure their faces to show others they are fasting. Truly I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you fast, put oil on your head and wash your face, so that it will not be obvious to others that you are fasting, but only to your Father who is unseen. And your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you. Today's reading is by Sinclair Ferguson. Jesus does not draw a dichotomy between outward and inward. The truly righteous person shows his righteousness in righteous deeds. Furthermore, true righteousness is expressed, says Jesus, in the disciples of the believer. Jesus calls these acts, I misread that. Furthermore, true righteousness is expressed, says Jesus, in the disciplines of the believer. Jesus calls these acts of righteousness. He does not say, be careful not to do acts of righteousness. He does not even say, be careful not to do your acts of righteousness before men. He actually says, be careful not to do your acts of righteousness before men to be seen by them. In saying this, Jesus is directing attention to motives. Why we do something is significant, as well as what we do. Jesus also clears away another general misconception by what he says here. The principle he expounds in Matthew 6:1 is illustrated in three different ways. In giving, chapter 6, verses 2 through 4. In praying, chapter 6, verses 5 through 15, and in fasting, chapter 6, verses 16 through 18. He indicates in what he says about each of these activities that sacrifice, self-discipline, and self-denial are called for in the Christian life. He assumes that our lives will be well regulated and properly structured, and that we will show an increasing mastery of our own desires. Jesus does not assume that these things will come naturally. Rather, he sees them as quite deliberate activities in the life of his disciples. To an unusual degree today, Christians mistakenly think that the freedom of Christian experience means that we no longer need to make any effort to be spiritual. We simply do what we feel and be ourselves. To live any other way, for example, to set aside definite and sacrificial amounts of money for the Lord's work, or to set aside specific time during the day for prayer, or to engage in deliberate acts of self-denial as we seek the Lord's face, is seen as legalism and bondage. Jesus, on the other hand, assumes that these disciplines are basic to any spiritual vitality, and he was no legalist. Each illustration indicates that our fundamental relationship is to God. Jesus describes a man who is the essence of charity, or so he would like others to think. He plans to give a gift, so he hires a musician, a trumpeter. After all, if he is going to give to the poor, he will need to call their attention to his provision. Why else would a man hire a trumpeter and give his gift publicly? Why else indeed? But, says Jesus, this is not a gift in the sight of God. It is a purchase. The man is not helping the poor half as much as he is using the poor to help him. He has received his reward in full. The language Matthew uses here is the same language that appeared on settled accounts in the ancient world. When such men are seen by their fellows, then God writes over their lives, paid in full. You wanted man's approval, you got it. You ain't getting mine. We do not need trumpets any longer. We call press conferences instead. Why is it that donors, large and small, seem to feel a need for people to know of their donations? Of course, the amount remains undisclosed. After all, one shouldn't give to the needy in public. People might think we did it for the sake of our reputation. Even those of us who are in no position to call press conferences or hand out press releases can still find ways of quote-unquote letting it slip, that we give to the cause. Sometimes the most subtle way to do so is by letting others know how much blessing we have received since we started to give a certain percent of our income, our gross income, of course. How subtle our desire for reputation is, and it is subtle. Give, Jesus says, but when you do so, forget about yourself and forget about others. Keep it between yourself and the Lord and do it as unto the Lord. Jesus talks about another man. He's not ashamed that he's a man of prayer. Unfortunately, he prays more in public than he does in private, and he prays more eloquently, more fervently, more intimately in public than he does in private. Can it possibly be that all of his zeal for prayer is motivated by his desire to be seen by men? He certainly receives what he wants. Jesus' view of the Pharisees should act as a warning beacon to evangelical Christians. There may be a special temptation to which those who are zealous for holy living can fall prey, retaining the outward shell of spiritual life, emphasizing the importance of certain supposed marks of grace, but lacking the power and grace of God. Many Christians begin well in their quest for holy lives, as the Pharisees did, but become ensnared by their desire to have a reputation before men rather than before God. And that is the key to our good works. Not what we do, but why did we do it? And that's tough. That's tough. Our brains, or that deceitful heart that Joshua talks about in his book, we can fool ourselves so much. And we did that good deed, and we did it secretly, but boy, somewhere along the line will it slip out. We want people to be impressed with it. It's hard. It's hard. But that's the test. Jesus says your righteousness has to be like that. It has to be that you love and you do good, and it doesn't matter who sees or who knows. You're not going to blow your own trumpet. That is from the heart. From the heart. Blessings to you today. Do all the good you can while you can do it, and do it as unto the Lord.